Thank you, Gus. And maybe Peter, I'll let you introduce yourself first, and then I can introduce myself and introduce us to the session.
Thank you. I'm Peter Blaze Corcoran. I'm speaking to you from the state of Maine and Wabanaki territory. I'll explain that more in a minute. I've been fortunate enough to be with NAAEE, at least as a member, for 42 of the 50 years. I can't believe it. I'm a professor emeritus, and I've been the last few years a professor of environmental studies and environmental education at Florida Gulf Coast University. And my particular areas of interest are spiritual activism, spirituality and environmental education, ethics, the Earth Charter, particularly right now. Thanks so much, Jenna.
Great, thank you, Peter. And hi, everyone. My name is Jenna Hoover. My pronouns are she, her, and I am on the traditional land of the Tongva people. And that is now called Pomona, California, which is in Los Angeles County. And we'd love to invite you all to share your names, your pronouns, and names of the original stewards of the land you're on. We're excited that this is a round table and that we can learn and be with each other today. And so I'm grateful to be here and I get to connect what I love about environmental education. I'm an educator at Chino Basin Water Conservation District. And I also care a lot about my faith and spirituality, and excited to share and connect together about how those two things connect. And so that's our big focus for today. I see that people are starting to introduce themselves in the chat. Thank you for doing that. And we'll continue to get to know each other over the course of this time. And just to let you know what we'll be reflecting on today, and to give us all a chance to start thinking, because I know I always could use some internal processing time before answering difficult, or not difficult questions, but interesting questions. We wanted to spend our time today reflecting on how can environmental education and spirituality benefit from increased connection. And Peter and I believe that they go both ways, that in our work, we can enhance and increase the effect and impact of environmental education by speaking into the spiritual aspects of our students' lives. And we also think that environmental education can deepen our own personal spirituality. And so I'd encourage you to start thinking about those questions, because we'd love to hear from you in a few minutes. And I put the questions, I'm just about to put them in the chat so that we can have both audio and written knowledge of those. But with that, I guess just before having Peter give some comments, I just wanted to acknowledge that there are definitely some spiritualities and religions that often take center stage, particularly in the United States where I am. And so in this space, we'd invite you to take efforts not to impose or center any particular spirituality or religion, and instead share of your own experience and be open to hearing from other people's experiences. And how we'll be sharing today is that you are welcome to share both verbally by unmuting. We ask that you raise your hand before speaking so that we can not overlap, particularly on Zoom. And you're also welcome to share in the chat. And so with that, I think I'll invite Peter to give some comments about what he's been thinking about in regards to this topic.
Thanks, Jenna. First, I want to acknowledge that I'm on the land of the Wabanaki, the people of the dawn in what is now called Maine. As I said, these are the first people to see the light on the eastern coast of North America. And the afternoon sun is setting here, but you may be able to see before the end of the session that just here over the water is the ancient settlement of Pemaquid, where there's documented indigenous habitation for 8,000 to 12,000 years. So I'm fortunate to be in a very sacred place. Also, just before I started, a wonderful flock of wild turkeys came by the front window here to wish us well in our session, I expect. Secondly, I want to offer kudos to Jenna. This is her first NAAEE presentation. She did most of the organizing. She attended our session last year, and I'm just so happy to have Jenna taking the lead with us today. So Jenna, thanks for all you've done. We developed, or we pulled actually from the literature, a definition of spirituality, which I will share with you. It's brief, and I think it does help to define, circumscribe a bit what we mean by spirituality. But of course, we all have our own aspects of a definition. But we pulled from the literature, actually from the literature of palliative care in health professions. We pulled a definition that spirituality is the aspect of humanity that refers to the way individuals seek and express meaning and purpose, and the way they experience their connectedness to the moment, to self, to nature, and to the significant or sacred. So we've been using that definition, if you will, in last year's session, in this year's session, and in the ongoing commitment of NAAEE to spirituality, which Jenna will tell you about later in the time we have together. I want to just provide a little bit of context for our conversation today. I think it's important, and those of you who have been attending the conference are probably very much aware of this, but I think it's important to acknowledge our work in spirituality, and for that matter, in environmental education, within the context of the civilizational crisis that we face. The climate collapse and the state of our climate anxiety affect us, affect our work, and affect those we serve, the learners with whom we work. I've been concerned personally with this problem for a long time, and I think we've all watched the challenges with climate and our feelings around them come much more quickly and more seriously than we had even imagined. Particularly today, I want to draw attention to a new study that I just read. It's on young people's voices on climate anxiety, governmental betrayal, and moral injury, a global phenomenon. And I don't know if you've come across this study yet. It hasn't been published, but it has been released through University at Bath, and it's 10,000 youth from 10 nations representing Northern and Southern Hemisphere. And the reason that I mention this study is that I think spirituality brings us to the moral dimension of our work, and can help us indeed. Just one thought from the introduction to the study. The authors write, failure of governments to prevent harm from climate change could thus be argued to be a failure of ethical responsibility to care, leading to moral injury. And I think that's a basis for our conversation about spirituality, because I believe that spirituality is a source of ethics for us. I think it's a source of moral guidance. I think that spirituality can lift our own spirits in our work, which is an issue for many of us. It's not just the climate anxiety that our students and learners of all ages feel, but our own sense of grief and concern that we bring to our work. And I do believe also that if we're going to make the changes that are necessary for us to make at this time, those changes are going to have to come from a very deep motivation. And our moral, ethical, spiritual beliefs are deep enough, we hope, to help us change our behavior. And I think that Spirit finally provides faith and hope for the future. A thought I've been working with a lot in my own work in spiritual activism lately is attributed to Van Jones, the CNN commentator. I don't know if it's his or not, but it said that it's in the convergence of spiritual people becoming more active and active people becoming more spiritual that the hope of humanity now rests. And so I think that also spirituality for many of us, this was in your opening thought, Jenna, that for many of us, spirituality leads to activism. And so those are my thoughts. We're really keen to hear from you around the table. And I'll just set the table a little bit, if I may. The question we dealt with last year, and I don't know if any of you were here last year other than Jenna and myself, please let us know when you speak. But last year we dealt with how environmental education can be positively changed through spirituality. But I love Jenna's question this year, which is how can environmental education and spirituality benefit from increased connection? So that we're asking not only how you think spirituality can serve, if you will, environmental education, but how how our own work in environmental education can benefit from our spirituality. So with that, Jenna, back over to you and to anyone who'd like to start the discussion.
Great, thank you, Peter. Yeah, again, you're welcome to raise your hand to be called on. You can use that reaction button on the bottom of your screen for raise hand. You're also welcome to share in the chat any thoughts about the questions that Peter and I have posed, as well as any other thoughts related to connection between spirituality and environmental education. And I can even help continue to start off the conversation. Like even in hearing your own comments, Peter, like I was reflecting on like how like climate change both feels like something that's like so pressing in like my own like thoughts, and definitely something that's there's anxiety about. And within my current spiritual community, within the church I'm a part of, climate change is rarely talked about. And I know that's a reality in many different spiritual spaces, but not all. And I think I've been on my own and with some folks, maybe I've connected more so with online or in other spaces, maybe in less formal spiritual spaces. We've been able to talk about climate change and how, and for me, like a way that I can try to maybe stay rooted in the midst of the reality and the facts and predictions is it's like recognizing that my spirituality allows me to have hope that that spirit, that creator is at work and is inviting people to work with them as they're addressing and creating a more just and sustainable and good world. And so I think that's something that I've been wrestling with and in the process of. And I'm grateful to have spaces even like this one where I can have these reflections, because those, I think my whole spiritual community could benefit from more of that connection. And I'll share in the chat. Nina shared, and then it looks like maybe, is it Alex, or you can help correct me on pronunciation, but if you'd like to share after I share Nina's comment, would love to hear from you. But Nina shared the knowledge in regards to spirituality and nature that scientists are just now starting to research and acknowledge has been present and passed down by indigenous peoples for many generations. We already have this innate knowledge within us. Yes, thank you, Nina. Yeah, that's so important to remember that there's a long history and present of this Indigenous knowledge and this connection. So thank you. And yeah, would love to pass it to you, Alex.
Thanks,
Or is it
Jenna.
Alex? Oh yeah, but please.
It's Alex. It's
Okay.
Alex, yeah. Oh, so I'm an informal educator, and I would say I'm more a climate advocate. And I choose to do some of my climate work with my faith community and within my faith community. And I think it's for several reasons. One is that the trauma of this just cannot be dealt with alone. And I actually expect my faith community to help us process our grief and come together and support each other through these times. Just like faith communities help people support through deaths in the family, or other things like that. I think it's so important that that happen. I also think these are powerful communities through which to make more powerful things happen. And we can't do things alone. Well, we can do some things individually, but it's much more powerful to take action in community. So it's kind of both of these sides of the equation. And then Peter, to your point about that article that or the study that you referenced, where so many children are just enraged and in fear and in pain around what is happening with the climate, what's happening with the earth, I started to think about what kind of religious education kids are getting around topics like these and how to live in the world like this. And that's something that I also think we owe our kids to support them through that. And it just feels like faith communities are a place that would be ripe to do that.
Thank you, Alex. As you're talking, I'm also thinking how the challenge of bringing the opportunity that exists in a faith community, say, to discuss those difficult issues with youth, how we can mainstream that, into secular settings, schools, or into, there's precious little of that even in churches and religious education. And then, of course, so many people are not involved with religion, and they have their own spirituality. How many times have we heard, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual? But oftentimes that school of thought doesn't have a shared community of the kind that you're talking about. So that suggests a couple of possibilities: creating communities of spirit in which these issues can be discussed, and trying to find ways to move it to reach more children in whatever informal settings, and say non-religious informal settings, camps or that sort of thing. I'd like to personally respond out, at least, to your comment about the power of a faith community. I hadn't experienced that until I'd reached a certain age when I had some health problems. And it was amazing to me. I'd always sort of had that intellectual model of a faith community, but when it really happens to you and the people who care for you, lift you up when you are in a difficult time. I think that's a wonderful analog to think about how we can help each other deal with the grief and the anxiety and the one of the things this study shows is this moral outrage with government. The feelings are very deep and very powerful, and we need settings in which to work and process these things through, and communities of faith are a perfect opportunity to do that. We have the experience, as you suggest, to help each other. So thank you so much.
Great. And Dennis, I see you turned on your video. I'm wondering if that's another way of raising your hand. Would love to hear from you, but if If not, no worries. If you're just here to listen, and we welcome that too.
Been a lifelong journey for me. I'm a life member of NAAEE, having joined back in the 1990s, and along the way was also ordained by the American Baptist Convention to environmental ministry, and they ordained me at a time when I was working for a local soil and water conservation district. So my primary avenue for ministry was as a public servant. So I've worked in a space both as a formal and non-formal educator, mostly non-formal, over bits and pieces of 3 or 4 decades now. But very glad to be a part of this dialogue. And my tradition now is Mainline Presbyterian Church USA, and we are doing lots of work in the area of responding to climate change, and a lot of work around grief and responding to climate distress by whatever name that distress goes by, but just recognizing that's a reality. So looking at sort of the pastoral care side of things, as well as the advocacy and activist side of things too, and trying to hold those in tension so that we can all, I think, be focused on planetary health and individual health all at the same time, because you really can't separate them out. It's a holistic proposition. Glad to be here.
Beautiful. Thank you, Dennis. So is the Presbyterian Church USA actively, do they provide materials and leadership and so on in this regard, or is that your own local or regional?
They do, and most of the mainline denominations, so Methodists, Lutherans, Presbyterians, I think American Baptists as well, have joined up in partnership with the Blessed Tomorrow arm of Eco America. And so through that partnership, Blessed Tomorrow is able to generate denominationally tailored specific materials that a given denomination may not have the staff or the funding to do from scratch. So
right.
that kind of collaboration has been a real boon. And again, I mean, those of you that are familiar with Eco America in general and Blessed Tomorrow in particular, they're dealing with the depth and the breadth that I was talking about before. So they've got a whole publication on the mental health aspects of climate change, as well as the science, as well as research-based. I mean, they've run any number of statistical studies documenting where the people in the pews are in terms of their attitudes about climate change, so that we're just not shooting in the dark, but we can make a very focused effort in our outreach to bring people along and get us where we need to go to hopefully reverse some of the effects of climate change sooner rather than later.
Thank you.
I shared the link in the chat, and it's something I'll be saving for later, and I'll also be saving the chat at the end. And if anyone wants to share resources, thank you, Alex. I'll make sure to send that out to anyone who shares their email for follow-up. And then, would continue to love hearing from you all in the chat, or raising your hand or turning on your video, or whatever way you want to let us know you'd like to share.
As people have been talking, I've been thinking, I mean, one of the tenets of environmental education is appreciating nature, making a connection to nature. and this is maybe more of a epistemological question, but if you're, isn't spirituality probably the deepest connection you can make with anything? So at some level, isn't that what we're striving for in a sense? We don't call it that in environmental education, but that connection, that harmony of being one with the world around you, that appreciation. It just occurred to me as we were talking that, I mean, we don't use the terminology, but at the bottom, that seems to be a lot of what we're trying to get people to make those connections at a very fundamental level within themselves with their environment.
Very much so, Gus. And I'm happy. I'd love to respond to that, but I'd be very happy to hear from someone else around the table. Any other responses to Gus? I think one of the challenges that we've faced over the years, Gus, in environmental education is that we were a bit afraid, is maybe not too strong a word, to talk about spirituality and faith and religion in environmental education, because so much of our work takes place in public funded spaces where those topics have been difficult to navigate. But there again, in addition to the skills that we have as environmental educators to bring people into harmony with nature, we also have the skills of dealing with controversial issues. That's part of our training and part of our heritage, is that we know how to present many aspects of a question and to educate rather than proselytize. So it seems to me that there's great value in naming spirituality as part of what we do, that people are hungry for spirituality. And I think part of the reason Jenna and I are interested in this whole field is to bring it more strongly into the profession, into professional training, and into professional life.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I feel like that there's so many opportunities for connection. And Alex in the chat wrote, what do you value? What do you want to see for the world? These can be proxies for inviting in faith. And earlier, making a connection between love for the natural world and love for creation, and using vocabulary that's familiar to some of our students and vice versa. And so, yeah, there's so much potential that I see. And Gus, it looked like you have something else to share.
Well, I was just going to say is that maybe part of the difficulty, in addition to that, walking that fine line between religion and, not appearing to foster someone else's religious belief in public settings, is we probably don't have a vocabulary to help us express what those kinds of connections could be without having this religious association with it. Just a thought.
No, it's a very important thought, because the words are so can be so controversial and so important. And one of the reasons I like the word spirituality is that it's not the word religion. And it's not even the word faith, which suggests a belief set, which has some people in the circle and other people out of the circle. And it seems to me spiritual activism is a term now with some currency, and spirituality might be part of the answer to that, Gus. It might be a more viable word than some of the words we've avoided in the past. Also, I think the culture is more open to spirituality than it might have been in the past. As I say, people are hungry. They're hungry for meaning. They're hungry for hope. They're hungry for a way forward that's positive. And so I think the timing is right. And I think we do have some work to do around process and methodology and approaches, but I think the time is is good.
And even in the chat, I can see some resources shared about discussions around the land ethic, as well as from Dennis, and then Martha sharing that everyone has a different way they define spirituality. And yeah, I think that the expansiveness of that word hopefully helps with some of that, but also, and Martha, if you have more to share about maybe where there can be challenges with using the word spirituality, would love to hear that as well. And at this point, oh yeah, go ahead, Martha.
Hi, everyone. I'm Martha. I work with Watsonville Wetlands Watch in Watsonville, California. And this is something that's been on my mind on how to integrate spirituality into education. But yeah, I think one of the challenges is that everybody defines it differently. And also the age group too can be different. And I think also there's limited time and we're trying to get through curriculum. So like, how do we make time for that? That's something that I've experienced personally is a time challenge. And another comment is also that that's like part of like what I'm looking towards is how do I look at myself as a whole person, and then how do I honor other people as a whole person as well, by integrating different aspects into the education curriculum. So yeah, that's all I have right now.
Thank you. I'd like to ask a part of the lead question for the roundtable that Jenna posed. When I heard the question, I really liked the thinking that Gus was using, for example, or I'll take it from Gus, how does your own spirituality or your own faith tradition or religion or whatever you call it, or your indigenous heritage or whatever it is, how does it help you as an environmental educator? Does it give you more to work with? Does it give you strength? Does it give you something that you wouldn't otherwise have?
And just a heads up, in terms of answering that question, we probably have about 2 minutes to answer that question before we start wrapping up. But we will have more opportunities to discuss that in the EE Pro group that's coming up. But I saw Julie doing the applause reaction. And Julie, if you want to share more, or if you were just, you were lifting up that comment or question, that's great.
Definitely. I was definitely lifting up that comment. Thank you so much, Peter. I feel like so many times we can get vilified for bringing in our spirituality to environmental education. So why not come from that aspect of strength, and what does it give us and what does it bring? So thank you.
Julie, let me give, and cut me off whenever you need to, Jenna, you're the boss. Just an example from my own experience. I've been, the book that brought me into this field was Rachel Carson's The Sense of Wonder. I realize of late that wonder has been a foundation for my entire philosophy and work in the field of environmental education. And I think wonder, this is to the comment we just had about time and controversy and so on. I think going back to what Gus said, that our own closeness to the natural world and the feelings that evoke, the feelings of connection, the feelings of wonder, the sense of beauty, the power of beauty, and so on. These are things that we can experience and share with our learners, even if we don't have the right words. They're spiritual experiences in that sense. And I think Gus is right that this has always been at the heart of our tradition. It began with nature love, with Anna Botsford Comstock, and loving nature and experiencing nature is inherently a spiritual experience, in my opinion. Thanks. Jenna, tell us about your big news.
Yeah, so Yeah, I'm excited, and I continuing to see comments in the chat from Martha and Dennis, and I feel like I want to talk to all of you about how you're navigating these things in your own work, because that's something I'm curious about too. And I'm excited that we will have a space to continue these conversations. We'll be launching an EE Pro group, so online through the NAAE website, to talk about spirituality and environmental education. And yay, I love the reactions. And we will actually we're currently looking for some co-moderators to work with me to help facilitate some of those conversations, to share resources, to help start conversations. And what I feel like you all are some great people to be a part of that. And we also would love for you to, whether a moderator or a participant, would love to have you in the EE Pro group, which should be launching by the end of the year. And so if you'd like to be kept in the loop about being a moderator or just knowing when the EE Pro group opens, I'd love if you could put your email in the chat. You can either privately message it to me, or you can put it out for everyone if you want to connect. We think this is a great opportunity to continue growing as environmental educators and keep on growing as people too, and as spiritual beings. And so I'm excited to continue connecting with you all. And I am going to save this chat because there's so much good stuff in here, and I'll save the chat as the first, or I'll send a saved chat as the first email that goes out to this group. Peter, any other comments?
Well, just to say thank you, Jenna, for we've been working on this. NAAE has had a challenging year, as we all know. It took a long time to get this approved, and we're so happy. And we're looking for a co-moderator. Jenna's agreed to co-moderate, and there's actually payment for time in co-moderating through NAAE. So be in touch with Jenna or me if you know anyone who'd like to co-moderate, or you'd like to co-moderate yourself. And by all means, let's expand the circle of people who want to join the EE Pro group on spirituality and environmental education. And I think we're just at the time, and I do have a benediction to close. So just take a moment, and we'll thank you for the time together. And we have a place to go to talk some more. And so let me offer a benediction for our meeting and for our last 2 years of these conversations. O Holy One of indigenous people, Israel, Islam, and the New Covenant, and of all spiritualities, known to us in 1,000 ways as energy, beauty, power, and above all, as love. Hear our thanksgiving for the work of the last 50 years of the North American Association for Environmental Education. Bless our journey. May we grow from strength to strength in our hearts and our minds. May we, as environmental educators committed to spirituality, promote and be an example for our students and our colleagues. O Holy One, may we continue to grow in our understanding of the ways in which environmental education and spirituality can benefit from an increased connection. Thank you so much for joining us.